What's going on, Restoration Nation? Rico Garcia here, and I'm really excited to go ahead and bring this episode. But before we dive in, just want to make a couple of quick public service announcements. First and foremost, the phone number for Restoration Domination is open and ready to hear from you. Remember, you can dial 678-TALK, the number 2, us. So 678 talk to us and leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Let us know what guests you'd like to see next. Let us know what your biggest takeaways were from some of the episodes. And we just really genuinely love to hear from you and what you're getting from the show and which one of our guests has possibly, created the biggest impact or created the biggest thought process for you, right? So that would be definitely something that we would want from you. Make sure that you pick up the phone, shoot us a call, 678 talk to us. Also want to give a big shout out to our show sponsors. Remember, if you haven't checked out our Public Adjusting Corner and our Legal Corner, go ahead and do so. This is special episodes that are dropping once every month. On the Legal Corner, we're joined by Lawyer Britt, bringing us all of the new developments that are happening with regards to contracts and litigation and things of that nature that are relevant to our business and things that we should possibly keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on, as well as also joined by Carlos Machine, the claims machine from Policyholder Advocates, once a month with the Public Adjusting Corner, letting us know any new developments in the public adjusting space and some really unique case studies on how restoration contractors and public adjusters can work more closely together. So make sure that you go ahead and check out those bonus episodes, and as well as the fact that they are our platinum sponsors. So big shout out to them. Now, in today's episode, we are joined by none other than Jon Isaacson. Now, Jon, most of us know him from the Dyojo Podcast or from the several books that he's written. I mean, the guy is just really tapped into the restoration arena as a general whole, and such an amazing individual. He really understands the history of the restoration arena, but also has some really good insights as to how to develop great company culture, how to be a really good project manager, and so much more. So in this particular episode, we really unpack a lot of different elements about the restoration business, and I really think that you enjoy. So without further ado, let's jump into the show.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right, what is going on, guys? We are live. Jon, thank you so much for jumping on the show today. Are you ready to help us dominate today?
I think I'm ready, Rico.
I don't know, man. It's not kind of what you want to hear. You want to hear absolutely, yes, of course I'm ready. It's like, but well, you know what? We'll take the I think.
I feel like I'm on a game show, and I'm gonna get the trick questions. So
no, not at all, man. We treat all of our guests, with love and care. So yeah, no trickery over here. So do me a favor, man. Just for anybody in the audience that's listening to the podcast, they haven't heard the name, they're not familiar with you, they haven't seen your face, which I think is kind of like hard to miss because you're kind of like all over the place. Kind of give us like the small little fill in the gaps on the intro so everybody knows who you are.
Well, I think it was meant as a compliment. Someone said recently on social media about our podcast, annoying but helpful. So I think that's the void that I fill.
I think that was on a comment that we had, that I did on I think it was either on a Facebook group. I believe it was on a Facebook group. It's like, I think that what they said was like, the visual is a little hard to follow, but it's helpful.
Yep. Annoying but helpful. So that's been my motto for 2022. Like, you're always trying to, if you're putting your own product out, you're trying to find ways to engage the audience and mess with the algorithms. And Facebook seems to be hell-bent on making you obscure, and so you have to fight against that, right? But you asked about what am I, who am I? My name is Jon Isaacson. I have I have the Dyojo Podcast, the Dyojo, the Do Your Own Job Dojo. And I'm a restorer. I just got back from the RIA convention and expo, and last year it was like, "Who are you?" And this year it was like, "Oh, you're a restorer."
Right.
So we had a good opportunity to chat in Florida at the winter break. That was a lot of fun. So I'm excited to be here, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate the kind words. So let's get into like a little bit of your story. Obviously, restoration is one of these industries where you talk to 100 different people and you get 100 different entry points as to why they're in the business today.
Sure.
So like, what was your story? How did you get into the business?
I knew when I graduated high school, I wanted to work in construction, and I was fortunate enough. My good friend who became my wife was working at a cabinet shop, and so I got a job there and sucked at it for a while, and then made my way up to like managing the shop. Well, we got married, and she got pregnant. We're pretty sure it's mine, and needed to work closer to home. I was in California at the time, so I lived in Ventura, which if anybody's familiar, it's paradise. And I was working up the hill in Thousand Oaks, which is just before you go back down into the LA basin. And so I got a job that was the absolute worst I've ever had. Worst people. It was boring. But there was like a lull in the market. And so I was literally applying to anything and everything in the newspaper, for those of you that remember what that was. And there was an ad for carpet cleaning at a local service master. And that's, I interviewed. We were talking a little bit offline, the mold is gold era. It's right on that 3/4 mark. There was still money to be made in mold. And so, they threw me in a suit, told me to go demo walls, and had a lot of fun with that. I thought I was going into criminal justice, and those doors didn't open. But doors in property restoration were opening, and I really enjoyed the work. And I was fortunate enough, the first people I worked with were really good people. So that combination kind of cemented my future, I think.
Yeah. So what were like your next steps from there, right? So now you're finally like in the door with service master, and you're learning the business. I know that, you and I have spoken a couple of times, and you're really fascinated by the history of the restoration.
Yeah.
Era, right? Just like all of the changes and everything that's happened. And that's kind of like your big deal, right? So, as a new tech, like how did you kind of like how did you advance in the industry? What were your next steps from there?
Sure. Yeah. We were talking another fella in your neighborhood, Ben Ricciardi, on the Restoration Rundown. There's a lot of restoration podcasts popping up the last couple of years, and a lot of good stuff. So my boss, a man named Denis, said, "We get paid for what we document. We don't get paid for what you guys do. We get paid for what we document." And so if anyone's listening and you're wanting to grow your career, man, rule number one in growing your career is make your boss's job easier. And there's a caveat to that. If you continue to do that and you're getting abused and there's no advancement opportunities, then you may need to look for other opportunities. But that's typically the way things work, right? You make somebody else's job easier. As a restorer, you make the adjuster's job easier, yada, 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 within reason. And so, man, I would chicken scratch my notes in the field, but then I'd go home at night and like write them out so they were legible and clear and detailed. And so as I did that, I got opportunities to start helping write estimates as our apartment grew and things like that. And I was getting offered opportunities, I've quickly made like supervisor and foreman and those kinds of things. And I was getting opportunities to possibly be the assistant manager. And I said, well, the owner said, if we're going to promote you, we need like a lifelong commitment. And I was like, dude, I've been very transparent with you guys. I'm planning to go into criminal justice, so I can't give you a lifetime commitment. And I would say to owners, a lot of owners want to say, like, if somebody's not going to commit to it, I don't want them here. But I'd rather have somebody that's an A player for 6 months, just knocking it out of the park and being transparent about what their next goals are or moving along, gracefully, than, having CD players in the wrong roles for years and years, So,
right.
So anyways, they hired other managers and they were terrible and they just didn't respect. We had a good team. We had a team that didn't really need to be, micromanaged. It just needed, support and those kinds of things. And so I got really frustrated with who they were hiring. And so it's like, I got into management because I said, I don't want you to hire another person like that. So if that's what it takes, then yeah, I'll be the manager. And so, again, like I said, thankfully I had a really good mentor and it was a good system, and, started getting into writing out manuals and trying to get our systems consistent and those kinds of things. So that was, I guess, the trajectory in the industry and also into leadership and management and those kinds of things.
Right. So where did the books come from? Did you just like wake up one day and you're saying, man, you know what? I really want to go ahead and put pen to paper.
I enjoy reading, and I've always wanted to write a book, blogged. And I want to say, I was looking at, as far as industry wide, I think my first article in R&R when Michelle was there was like 16 or 17. It was an article on open office spaces in restoration. So yeah, just real earth-shattering stuff. But I had always wanted to write a book, and I wrote an article, I believe it was in 2018, called The 10 Commandments of Xactimate, Estimating Success. And she sent an email out at the end of the year, and that was the #1 article, I guess, for the year, or it was in the top 10. I think it was the #1 article. That didn't oh my God, I'm the best thing that happened to restoration. I was just thinking, though, it said to me there's a need and an interest there on that particular topic. And if anyone's read the book, it's not a how-to on Xactimate, but more mindset and habits. And then particularly, a call out to the industry not to play the blame game. You can't blame the tool, if you're not using it correctly. And so that I actually had planned to write the second book first, the culture book, which is a collaborative, but some things fell out that didn't quite work. And so I ended up being forced into self-publishing. And so I didn't feel it was appropriate to experiment on self-publishing with something that could affect other people. So the estimating book was my first experiment in that.
And by the way, just for the record, for everybody watching, the book that's being mentioned is Be Intentional Estimating, which I will leave links in the video description as well as in the show notes below. So if you haven't gotten your copy yet, if you haven't read it, if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it but you haven't pulled the trigger on it, now would kind of be the time. It's got some pretty good stuff in there that you'll definitely be able to walk away from. So just as a reference point, that is the book that we are currently at. So this was your first book, right? The Be Intentional Estimating.
Yep,
right.
Yep.
And then after that, so I mean, obviously, I know that this book has gotten quite a bit of traction. It's been, delivered to quite a few hands so far. I mean, entire project management teams have gotten their hands on this book. So obviously it's gotten some really amazing traction. How long was it from your first book to your second book?
Well, like I said, the second book, the book, Be Intentional Culture, was intended to be the first. We had a publisher lined up and was trying to get culture, I think, is a real like trigger word or catchword, and it can mean, it's almost kind of lost its meaning to a lot of people. But the idea behind that book was getting leaders in the space, in insurance and in around our ecosystem to share one very simple thing that they've done that's helped lift their culture, and then one kind of aha moment where you're like, man, I tried this and it really shot me in the foot. Just real practical stuff. And so that was intended to be the first. So I think they came out pretty quickly in succession, maybe within 6 months of each other or less. The book 2 was all but done. And then I thrust into finishing book 1, the estimating book, to figure out how to maneuver through Amazon's it's Kindle Direct Publishing is the platform. So yeah, Kindle Direct Publishing, which by the way has done great things for so many people. Yeah. I mean, such, now you could just, if you've got a good idea, you've got something good you want to say or something that, you just need to get off your chest, just put it down on a document and boom, within a couple of hours, you are officially published and hopefully changing lives in the process, right? So just for reference, and again, I will have all of these links in the video description and in the show notes. The second book that we're talking about, or book 2 in the series, is the Be Intentional Culture. And this is kind of what it looks like. But then again, for those of you that are listening and exclusively listening, just go ahead and click the link below and it'll just take you directly to the page. And talking about culture, right? Because it is kind of like this buzzword and everybody's got a different idea and or concept about what culture is really all about.
And this was a collaborative effort. So there's tons of different opinions, even within this one, this one book. If you had to pick out like your top 3 aspects of good to great company culture, what would you say that is?
Well, the principle from that book that gets brought up all the time and is so effective from the good to great is get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seats, right? So I think a lot of times I was just on a call yesterday with a project management team talking about the project management book number 3. And that was, sometimes knowing when it's time to maybe explore whether this person has currently the skill set and the ability to perform the role, or maybe they're just better geared for a different role in your team. Because I think I talk about in the culture book, it's very simple, right? We need people that are honest, hardworking, and willing to learn, right? Like I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but I think I brought those 3 things to the table. And anybody that comes in, and I think that's a lot of what I write to, is I feel like there's a lot of people out there that want to grow their careers and are good people and maybe phase out or we lose them. And it's, if someone is honest, hardworking, and willing to learn, there ought to be a career trajectory for them in your company. And unfortunately, one of the biggest things I think we do to shoot ourselves in the foot is have these static positions, right? You have to be this or you have to be this. And so I think that's a cultural thing. But the biggest thing in culture is your culture is you. Like you can say whatever the heck you want and throw a poster up on the wall, but your culture is what you guys do. And so that's a part of the book where it talks about the norms and expectations. And so you have what the leadership team says, and then you have what the team does. And there's a lot of dissonance between those. And if you can be honest with that as a person in a position of leadership, then you can make real traction. But if you want to say, no, it's up on the wall, this is what we're about, this is what all our people do, and then you don't ever check in.
Do as I say, not necessarily do as I do type of deal, right? It's like, don't follow my lead, just follow the writing on the wall.
It's right there.
That's actually going to move the needle. Yeah, exactly.
And you don't train on it. You don't ever, or you don't hold management level accountable to it. Only the technicians are accountable to the culture, then,
right.
It's just BS, right? It doesn't.
Do you think that culture at this particular stage in the game is getting better than, let's say, it was 5 or 10 years ago overall? We were kind of talking off camera about, people becoming a little bit more quote unquote woke, right?
Sure.
And just having this awakening as to the new workforce that's entering the market, and then how they need to be treated, what they respond to and what they don't respond to. And guys, how like 20 years ago, you could just kind of throw a wrench at their head and just tell them how bad of a job they're doing and be like, toughen up. And then miraculously that would work for that particular demographic. If you do that, if you sneeze too hard today on certain people, they'll start freaking out. They just want to quit. So like, if you were to compare, again, kind of apples to oranges, right? Like, cause it is a different time. Do you think that there's a better evolution with regards to upper management and ownership and understanding how they have to treat their partners and staff and their overall team members?
I think that's a loaded question. I think we're inherently stubborn, right? And so I think what you have to realize, I think I mentioned that in the culture book, you can be an asshole and be a good manager, but you have to know that that's what you are and who you are, and then build people around you that offset those weaknesses, right? So if you're a jerk, but you don't get anybody around you that has empathy and compassion, you're just going to burn through people. And so people just need to know, the person that's a nice to your face and then a jerk behind closed doors, or vice versa. I think that's what people have a lot of issues with. Man, I think it was Anthony Nelson just wrote an article recently. It was about odor removal and CNR. And it wasn't, it's not mind-blowing stuff, but he was talking about, the younger generation wants to know the why, right? And so he was talking about how being a manager, he's just like, geez, why do I have to explain it to you? Exactly like you're talking about, man. Someone just said, just go do it. And then, but he said he had an epiphany when that person yelled at him and said, you're doing this wrong because you're not doing blah, 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 and it's causing blah, 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 blah. And he goes, oh, I get it now. I understand why it's important that I do these little tedious things. We can complain. If you're in a position of leadership, you can complain about it, but it's not going to help you. Like, you've got to adapt. Like, adaptation is the most important. And right now, at least in our business and most of the people I talk to, work is easier to come by than people. So you better take care of your people, right? Like, just if you want to survive, we're not even talking about, saving humanity or being woke. If you want to survive, you better be taking care of your people and get on board with whatever that looks like.
Right. And just really taking the time and taking a step back to explain to your existing team and say, hey, this is important and this is why.
Yeah.
This is our company culture and this is how we came up with our company culture. These are the things that happen that we were able to identify that this in particular is our path, and this is why, and this is how our clients get affected, our relationships get affected, etc. The problem is that most entrepreneurs have it all stored up here, or they don't even have the ability to articulate
Sure.
what they're feeling. So it's a bottled feeling that they can't articulate to their team members. And then they get really frustrated when their team members are trying to interpret what this quote unquote company mission is or what the culture is. And then they get really upset because they didn't interpret it correctly, or they missed some major key points there.
Sure.
Right. So one of the biggest struggles I think with a lot of business owners is, how do you take what you have in your head? How do you have what how do you take what you have in your heart and what you feel, and then put pen to paper in a way that's, well thought out, articulated to where anyone can understand. And then there's an additional layer to that, which is, now how do you actually give steps, actionable steps on how to accomplish these things? And then it gets even more complicated because now you've got the steps, but now you need to understand the why. So there's like this entire practice that goes into developing company culture and developing this feeling in the workplace that ultimately is going to affect, in my belief, your overall profitability in business. Because if the owner can't do that, or if the management team can't do that, the techs, which is basically your front line, they're going to be getting the brunt of the hit.
Well, and to be honest, right, you could do everything right and you can still lose people. So, like, it's not like, A plus B equals C. A good example, man, the owner of our company recently kind of was spelling out more of the code of conduct, and there had been some slippages in that. And so we had the whole company there. It's not a big company. But what he had done prior is reach out to some of the influential people on the team and just said, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about Friday. I really need your support. This is exactly like you're saying. This is my heart behind it. This is my vision behind it. And then he shared in the group, and it wasn't even, it's not like it was this, magical moment or anything, but he shared, this is what we're doing. This is why. And then he presented it too. And I need your help because I'm just as much of a culprit at not following it as anybody here. So I need to lead by example. So we're going to have some grace, but we need to follow this. And then he shared, he had just been on a road trip, and he's like, I just met with one of my mentors, a person that I model the way I do business after. And I realized in talking to him, I'd implemented everything he taught me other than, enforcing this code of conduct. And so, that's why it's important to me. And so, again, it wasn't this, the curtains parted and, the doves came down and things, but it was just a real, exactly like you're saying, a full circle explanation of, this is what we want to do, the vision behind it, this is the why. And then for me personally, as the owner, this is why I think it's important. And I think that was my encouragement to him. To like, man, we got to do that more often, where people, exactly like you said it, like, hear not just from your head, but from your heart, right? I started this business because of X, and this is what I want it to look like. And this is why, rather than just, hey,
Yeah, exactly. So then that kind of leads us into your third book in your series, which is, so you want to be a project manager, which is highlighted right here. Again, in the show notes and in the video description, you can find a link. So when did you start getting to work on your third book?
I knew I was going to write another one. I didn't know. I'm trying to remember how that kicked. It's kind of a natural progression from estimating. If you've read the estimating book, the point of the estimating book is, one of the points is, an estimator can't be a silo, right? In a lot of businesses, they're treated like they're the rainmakers. They don't have to follow the rules. They're the untouchables, those kinds of things. And there's a bad estimate sets up so many domino effects through production, through the company, and those kinds of things. And that's not to say that the estimator is at fault, because that's more the process, the program. Like I was saying, I was talking to that other company yesterday, and some of the key things that don't get communicated is what is and is not in the scope. And so an estimator, especially if you're, like you mentioned, managed repair, if you're doing program work, there may be some things you had to do to get that initial estimate across the finish line, and then you're going to follow up with the adjuster and try to supplement for things. And if that's not communicated to the project manager, the project manager gets the scope and says, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And then the carpenter gets the scope, or the sub is like, I can't do it for that amount, but there's the missing pieces of communication down the line, from the estimator down, and then from the carpenter back up. And so I don't actually remember what kicked it off, but I had some content. It was probably like an article that hit, or a conversation or something, but it just seemed like the natural progression from estimating, because it ties into that. And the project management role is probably the most difficult in our industry, because you have to have the technical knowledge to either know what you're doing or not get taken advantage of, but you also have to meld these people skills, right? So the typical is you take a carpenter, or we had a business that we worked with where we took these one-man show contractors, right, who never had to answer to anybody, just ran things the way they wanted, and then threw them into this high customer service role where they're now managing other carpenters and other subs. It usually had a shelf life about 1.5 years, right? Because how come they're not listening to me? My customer's this, my customer's that. And so that's the idea there is, if you want to get into estimating, the estimating book will help with some of the mindset and habits to get there. Project management, I think, is a little more ubiquitous, because that's supervisors, foremans, superintendents, that term can be interchangeable, but just more of a, if you want to develop your career in this industry and in the skilled trades in a broader sense, here are some of the things that are going to really help you achieve that.
Right. So obviously it's much more, project management is a very complex position to begin with, right? No matter which way you slice or dice, because there's so many different moving parts and what you have to do. And again, anybody who's been in the business for, even if you just got into the business and it's just you and maybe a helper,
you're a project manager.
You're still project management. That's still project management, right? It's that plus 1,000 other things that you do on a daily basis. But you can see, if you just take a step back, like how complicated it could certainly be, bucket. Right? So having the right mindset and developing the right habits throughout that process is extremely important. You cover quite a bit of that in the book, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's the talk about confirming the scope, and I think the first 2 chapters are more on preparing yourself for success and believing in the process and developing yourself, and then. And part of that too, you got to be real honest. Like, if you want to grow your career, you got to be honest with what you're good at and you're not good at. And going back to my experience, if you don't do your paperwork now, if you're a technician and you don't do your paperwork now, it's only more paperwork. It doesn't ever become less paperwork. It becomes more paperwork, And so, if you're not willing to do the things that you're being asked to do now, you're not going to advance. Like, you may get a shot, but you're not going to be prepared, because it's more paperwork the further and further you go up, the line.
Right. So I know that you have another book that's currently in the works, but before we dive into that, I just want to go ahead and take a quick moment and thank our sponsors. Hey, Restoration Nation. So real quick, I want to talk about your estimates. And being in the restoration industry, look, we have to make sure that our documentation is super tight and it's on point, and we want to eliminate as much back and forth with the insurance carrier as much as we possibly can. And this is why I want to talk to you about Impartial. And I really love the name because it's supposed to be impartial. Kind of get it? So the reason why this is such an amazing software is because it uses the technology that most of us are already using, which is the Matterport technology, and then basically makes this on steroids when it comes down to building your estimates. And Impartial has 3 main offerings that I want to talk to you about real quick, starting off with Impartial Scope. Now, when we're talking about impartial scope basically allows you to generate a carrier-approved worthy estimate. And basically the way that it does this is by extracting all of the relevant data from pre-mitigation as well as your post-mitigation scans and packages this up in such an amazing way to where it eliminates so much back and forth. And again, the whole idea as our industry evolves is to harness the power of this kind of technology. Not only that, but it also has another offering, which is Impartial Embed. And basically what this does is it gives you the ability to go ahead and tag with highlights, your general scope notes, mitigation activity, moisture readings, and so much more information. You even have the ability to go ahead and upload JPEG pictures, PNG, ESX, and so much more right into the impartial tags, which makes your documentation that much more tight, which ultimately leaves less room for people on the other end to have much of an opinion as to what your estimate is about. Because again, this is all about harnessing real physical data. So not only that, there's obviously a lot of industries or a lot of instances where you're going to need to make some changes to your estimate. And lately what we've been seeing is a lot of back and forth between Xactimate and Symbility, which leads us to Impartial Convert, where it basically takes any estimate and can change it between Xactimate and Symbility and vice versa, and really makes this entire process very, very easy. And we've got something really special for you, Restoration Nation, for listening to the show, watching the show, and it's an amazing offer that I want to go ahead and extend to you. And that is if you head on over to info@impartial, and that's impartial.io/domination. And again, the link is going to be in the video description as well as in the show notes below. You're going to get an amazing offer, and that is a total of 99% off their enterprise plan. So just go ahead and visit info.impartial.io/domination. Go ahead, check them out. You're going to be happy you did. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from timestamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate, get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. Right. We are back. So we left off. There's another book in the works, right? So you're just like banging these things out like left and right. I think you might have like a ghostwriter somewhere. You're like, hey, just talk about project management. I don't know, figure some stuff out. So the next book coming out, what's that book going to be all about? And then who's that really geared towards as far as, helping them, in their careers and their business?
Yeah. Lisa Lavender with Restoration Technical Institute reached out about taking some of the elements of book number 1, the estimating book, and turning that into a course. Again, not a how-to course, but more of mindset and habits for people that want to get into estimating, or managers and owners that are managing other estimators to try to, get more clarity and consistency in that process. So the question became, do I just create a course out of Be Intentional Estimating? Do I do a version 2, a revised version, or write a whole separate book? And so I just felt like it's better. I got some advice early on, once you write a book, you just kind of leave it alone, right? Like let it be unless there's something glaringly problematic with it. So this next book, the working title right now is How Not to Suck at Estimating. And the idea there is kind of building on those estimating, and it merges some of the principles from estimating and project management. Because there are a lot of run estimators, people that write the scope and run the project, especially in smaller companies. Or if you're a one-man show, like you mentioned, you're doing it all. So that's the idea there. Similar audience in all three of the books is the aspiring professional, somebody that wants to grow their career and wants kind of a roadmap to say, okay, these are some of the things I need to consider and do. There are a lot of people in our industry, and that's not specific to our industry, that get thrust into management, and maybe they have technical skill in something, but they don't have the people skill or the management skills or budgeting and those kinds of things. So trying to help those new managers out, hey, here's some tips in managing other people and having a better understanding of what that looks like. And then the owners and seasoned managers that are trying to develop their process, I think a lot of owners, if they read any of my books, will just be like, I've been saying this for years, and sometimes
Right.
all you need is just somebody to say it in just a different way for it to click, right? They're tired of hearing you say
Yeah,
it.
well, I mean, it's just a second voice, right?
Yep.
I mean, that happens in any career.
Yep.
It happens in any office that you could walk into. You can get any Joe Schmo off the street, basically, and just like pop them into the morning meeting
Yep.
and just, have them
Oh my God,
regurgitate
yeah.
what the owner says. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, really? Is that how it works? It's like, yeah, that's what same guy's been saying this
Rico
for,
said,
years.
like, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's like all of a sudden it's like the sky opens up and they get it. And all it was is just a different voice, but that just goes to show like human psychology and human nature and how that works. So we pretty much like covered all of your books, man. So now let's get down into like some of like the inner thoughts about the business, the industry.
Okay.
And let's talk about, some of the great changes that you've seen in the evolution of the restoration arena. And let's also then, I kind of want to, unpack what changes you might have seen or trends you've seen in the industry that maybe aren't as great for the overall industry. So give me like the good and the bad if we were to go ahead and turn back the hands of time and make a comparison.
I guess what comes to mind when I got started in 2002, which for some people that's a long time, and for other people that's just getting started, right? The information was a little more centralized. I think the outlets you had, I don't remember R&R being available. The internet wasn't as developed. So you had magazines like Connections from IAQA, and it was this big paper that came out, and I loved reading that. I read every stinking article that was in there. And I'm trying to remember, I knew about the RIA. We were a lot more engaged in the IICRC and taking classes and those kinds of things. And I discovered there's the godfathers of property restoration podcasting, before it is even podcasting, is IAQ Radio. And they had internet radio, and I can't remember if you had to tune in live or, you had to download it or something if you missed it. And it was it's like college level, right? It's drinking from a fire hose. And so you had centralized information. Social media wasn't developed like it is today. And so there's some advantages to that, I think, in the sense that it encouraged people to meet in person or read. Just because it's in a magazine doesn't mean it's better than a blog or something like that, but there's at least maybe a little bit of a screening process.
Right.
Whereas now social media, the beauty of social media is there's instant access, right? People can ask questions and get immediate feedback. But I think it also inherently, there's a lot of noise, and you have to decipher between what's good information and what's not. And a lot of people want to make something that's been bothering me lately is just moral accusations, about business decisions that aren't moral or ethical. They're amoral. Like this is not a moral decision, however you want to cast it in that light. And it's funny because I believe a lot of the same people would be offended if that were phrased in a political sense and the government were doing it, but they're almost asking for the same thing in reverse. And so it's just the mental loopholes people go through sometimes is just odd. So I think social media in that sense has created, access, but it takes away, it's harder to get those people socially connected back into in-person. I think in that sense, COVID maybe has been good because we kind of got away from meeting in person. COVID took it away almost completely, right? And I think there was a real hunger for people to come back together in person. We've been trying to do that here locally, get a local networking group going, and we've got some traction there. And it was really funny because I was at RIA in Reno, and there's a whole bunch of people from Washington that don't come to our local meeting, but made the time to go to Reno, and then vice versa. We have local people that aren't involved in the national effort, and so. But at the end of the day, everybody's got to do what's right for their business, what they believe is right based on the information they have at the time, and then always be seeking better information. And in that regard, I think there's a lot of access, and I think everybody has to go through that process of, okay, maybe this person can help me with this aspect, but I question whether they have the best advice in this aspect, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? People have their strengths and their qualities, and just, I think the good is there's a lot of access to information, and I don't really think it's bad, but the trick is you have.
But here's the question, man. I think that it's all relative, right? Because realistically, at least in my opinion, there's really not that much information when it comes down to our industry. I mean, when you look at other industries, right? If you look at for example, the medical industry or the housing industry or, real estate or mortgage or roofing, even, right? Pretty much like any other trade, you've got so many players in that particular industry, so many events, and so many people that are banging out such amazing content. And when you have some of these events, I mean, you're talking about 3,000, 5,000, 8,000 people deep. And the awkward thing has always been for the restoration arena, it seems like it's very siloed, especially when you compare the financial impact that the restoration industry has, right? Because you're talking about billions of dollars in losses, right? And how many restorers there are by comparison to let's say a local electrician's, chamber, for example, right? And if you kind of dig into any other trade, there's all of this, literature, there's all of this stuff. And I'm not saying that our industry doesn't have it, but it still feels kind of siloed by comparison to a lot of the other industries. Do you think that's just because everybody's got their proverbial head in the sand and they're just kind of in their own lane? Or do you think that part of that is some of these really successful, high octave entrepreneurs within our space are just, in a position to where they're like, yeah, you know what, I figured it out. Everybody else will figure it out. They don't really want to share information that's going to move the needle? Or what's your take on that?
So the last part, as far as people sharing, I think in a lot of ways, some of the people that are most eager to share are the people that probably have the least to share. There's some of that, and maybe that's generational or whatnot, where, hey, I just learned this and blah, 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 blah. And I think that's twofold. What we do at its core is not that complex. The building's wet. Let's get it dry. That's not that complex.
Right.
But we want to make it really, really complex. And I think when I think about it, when I step back and think about it, our industry is built on a lot of people that are very independent, right? Which is beautiful and awesome. But people tend to be guarded. I can say I worked for a big restoration company, and a guy that I wanted to promote went to work for another company. And they said on the way out, and this is, in the late 2000s, or mid 2000s, make sure he's not stealing the paperwork on the way out. And I'm like, dude, our competitors are using iPads. He's not stealing paperwork. And even if he did steal the paper, what is it? Your RH readings? That's not trade secrets. Those are basic stuff that you can download from the internet. And so I think it's really weird. We get kind of guarded about these odd things that we think are like trade secrets. And there's people like Ben Justison that's sharing a lot of the stuff that he's doing. A friend of mine, Gordy Powell, that does trauma, he was talking about, he just did a class on invoicing, and he's like, I want to share this information because if everybody's kind of talking in a common language, we got to be very careful about price fixing. But if we're talking in the same scope, common language, then, and that was a lot of people that took his class were just like, wow, I didn't realize that's how you phrase it, or that's how you do it. And some of that's training, or maybe the courses don't always go over that, but we get kind of odd. We protect some of the odd things. And then I think there's people from time to time that post stuff on the internet, on social media, that are maybe working through the process and they just get their teeth kicked in, well, you didn't fully duct tape your glove to your suit or something like that. And that's what somebody zeroes in on. And there's a difference between,
Well, personally, I think that that's the most ridiculous thing
yeah,
to zero in on, because that has, again, I think that from a very technical aspect, it's really not that complex, right? It's kind of like what you said. You've got a fan, you've got a dehue, you've got some affected wall. It doesn't matter if it's water, it doesn't matter if it's mold, it doesn't matter if it's blood or whatever. The wall's probably more than likely is going to have
yeah,
to go.
yeah,
Like that's it. The little nuances of like, oh, you didn't duct tape this, or oh, you've got your Tyvek on, but
yeah,
your
yeah,
hood's not on. Like just the stupid minutia. None of that has a physical effect on the financial aspect of the
sure,
business. Right now, could that be a one-off, type of deal that maybe they just caught a bad picture, or maybe they were even
yeah,
staging a picture and they just forgot that
yeah,
one little detail. Like for me, I feel like the industry is like broken up into two camps. You've got the camps that really care about the business aspect of what's going to make it work, and then you've got like the
technical,
die hard technical, like, hey, this is the fan that you need to use, this is how many CFMs
yeah,
and
yeah,
the AHAM
yeah,
this and this
Pascals, yeah,
like all the geeky stuff that you could be really really good at that, but doesn't mean that you're going to have a
sure,
successful business. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a great
yeah,
company culture. It just means that you're a really really good
right,
instructor, and that you can kind of regurgitate what the standards are and what the best operational
yeah,
procedures are. And I think that there is a time and a place for that, but I don't think that that's like what people should really be
yeah,
focusing on, especially when people are asking for help and or some
yeah.
exchange of ideas when they're talking in a
Well, and I
Facebook
think
group.
you have to decipher between, is this person saying, I'm the best and da 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 da. Well, you're inviting yourself to get just hammered, right? Or if someone's saying, hey, we're learning about this, look at what my team's doing. I mean, that's good on them. So yeah, I think that's the business and the technical, and what people don't realize. The one guy that didn't get the job, and he's like, that guy doesn't even do X number of pascals. That's so good luck. And it's like nobody
Right.
cares. I mean, unless you can communicate it in a way that people understand. And so exactly like you're saying, like the technical people have a lot to learn from the business people and vice versa, right? Not recognizing that other people have something to offer you is going to inhibit your own growth and the growth of your company, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. What's your take on all of the like private equity, bigger organizations that are kind of stepping in where they're obviously much more surgical. They look at business in a much more efficient way than your traditional mom and pop or family owned and operated type of operation. How do you think that that's going to be affecting the industry moving forward? And also the caliber of estimator, project manager, technician that you would have to be in order to succeed in that new environment?
Yeah, there's a couple of buckets or conversations that kind of stick out to me. One of them, I was in a conversation at Core in Austin last year, and someone mentioned, traditional restoration contractors are saying these margins are terrible and we can't survive on these. And then it's like, well, look, these equity companies are coming in droves, right?
They beg to
So
differ.
they're
Right.
seeing something.
Right.
So if you're saying, I can't work with this, da 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 da. And it's so funny, you talk to somebody, talk about the estimating book, talk to somebody and like, well, why not? Well, they keep denying this line item and this line item and this line item. That's not like, you can't have it both ways. You can't complain that it's a terrible tool and then the tool is the justification for your price that you're pissed about not getting. It's like, it's illogical. Like your argument does not stand up on its own. So, this was a newer contractor, but they did some demo for another contractor. They got after hours rates paid on everything that they did for demo. And then the company wasn't going to pay the emergency service charge. It was like $180 or something like that.
There's
Yeah. I
150
was like,
bucks or
you've
whatever
got
it was. Yeah.
$600 here that most adjusters would never approve. And you want to argue over $180 just because someone told you that Xactimate sucks. Like, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? And so it's just, I would encourage people, like, if you're playing the blame game, if you're saying, man, the margins are terrible, blah, 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 Xactimate's terrible, blah, 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 blah. Well, what are you doing about it? Like, what are you doing to fix it? What are you talking to if you're just going to social media to bitch about something, you're going to find other people that want to do the same thing. And next year, you're still going to be doing the same, 12 posts a day, And so I think that should be an eye opener for restoration contractors. Equity's seeing something. There's something there. There's money to be made. So then the interesting part is that integration, like you and I know, restoration's a weird animal, right? And so there's two parts to that, though, because I'm working with an owner now that doesn't come from the restoration industry. And so, our agreement is like, man, you've got to, if it doesn't make sense, we've got to talk through that, because there's a lot that we just kind of, you start to, even though you swear you don't, you start to just do because you're like, well, that's the way the industry is. And maybe it's BS, right? Maybe you're doing the wrong thing, just because you're like, you've convinced yourself. I've been doing it 20 years, right? So I'm sure I've got bad habits and mindsets that have crept in. And so when someone from the outside looks in, we have a natural say, well, you don't understand the industry. And they might be saying, well, you don't understand business, exactly like the conversation you were saying previously. So I think some of that could be very healthy. To me, the one that makes the most sense is like ServPro and now I'm drawing a blank on the company that invested in them, but it's a large property management company. It's like every restoration company would be salivating, right? Blackstone, because they seem to have merged or joint collaborative opportunities that marriage their service lines, right? Their opportunities. So I think there's some of that can be really healthy. The other side of it is already a lot of restoration companies focus solely on the financials. And that's one, it's obviously you have to profit, right? Or you're not going to have a business. You just have a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. You have a hobby, right.
But you have to get the repeat business and work your way out of some of the traditional things that we complain about. You've got to get that repeat business and build a reputation. We don't always build that by just focusing on price. You have to provide real value, right? My price is my price because I say it's my price. Well, what is the value that you're offering? And so I think another conversation I had recently was someone saying, maybe if the market keeps doing what it's doing, equity might realize there's not as much margin as they thought and maybe will withdraw. That's an interesting perspective. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. And then the other side is, I think, like most industries, you'll have the big bigs, right? I think Jeff Moore that said we'll go from like 12 players to 7, like the bigs will just get bigger. And so I think there'll probably always, like most industries, there'll always be the big dogs and the little dogs. The big question is what's going to happen to the companies in the middle. They're probably the ones that are going to feel the most pressure. Or if you're small, it'll be harder to get into some of those, say the 7s to 10 million, in revenue, just because you're of what you're battling against,
Yeah, well, I think that, from that perspective, just from a business perspective in that regard, I think that it's going to be a really interesting dynamic because I think that for the small to mid-sized companies, this is an amazing opportunity for them to start gauging where their business is at and where they can potentially improve, because if they have gotten too busy or they've grown too fast and they might have missed a couple of steps to make their businesses attractive for a buyout, let's say, this would be an amazing time, I think, in the history of our industry, to where you can kind of button everything up and make it really, really attractive to sell. The other advantage too, though, I think that the small players, small to mid-sized players, have a huge strategic advantage that no one's really talking about. And that strategic advantage is from a speed to market perspective. It's from being nimble. It's your marketing message now becomes different. Sure, some of these bigger organizations, they might have a Super Bowl ad that's running, but do they know, Susie Q's daughter and when their birthday is coming up? And so I think that for the smaller to mid organizations, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and rethink your role in the community, rethink the relationships that you have with facility managers and or insurance agents, or however it is that you get your business, right? That I just don't believe that the bigger organizations have the ability to do at a rate faster than the smaller guys on a very, very local level. And I think that strategically, that's a huge advantage. And for some reason, like no one's really talking about that.
Yeah. Well, like hyper local, right? You know, own the local market so much that it's difficult.
Well, everything is hyper local, right? Like, I mean, everything is hyper local. I don't care if you're a franchise, it's still hyper local. You know, you can be coast to coast. Well, you got territories, right? The problem is that most, well, at least in my opinion, right? And someone can come and probably like bash me in the comments below, but I highly doubt it because it's just true. On a franchise level or this big box, you know, type of environment, they're not thinking in terms of hyper local. They're thinking about how they can sell the next territory. They're thinking about, you know, small little bits on how to increase their profitability, keep their shareholders a little bit happy. And whatever their marketing efforts are, their messaging efforts are very top level. It's like, hey, you know, you need better SEO, or, hey, you know, you need to go out and, you know, have this marketer or business development person to go out and just, you know, drop off whatever that looks like. But once you start getting a little bit deeper into how to really, you know, grow some roots, if you will, like in that local community, that's a whole different skill set. And unless it kind of comes from the top, and because everything has to be approved, there's a lot of steps that have to take place before you can put your logo in on a document or something along those lines. Whereas if you're just a local business owner and, you know, small to mid-size, if you get an idea, you can probably start executing on that by tomorrow, right? And then even if your campaign or if your idea or if your new strategy is so wildly successful that it catches the eye of these bigger organizations, well, by the time that they get around to it, well, then they're second to market. And some would say, oh, well, you know, they have bigger dollars, they can go ahead and blow you out of the water. I mean, you know, second is still second. So, you know, that's one of these like small little hidden benefits, I think, that does exist for the companies that have that maybe aren't as big, that, you know, are like looking at the situation like, oh man, what's going to happen with all this like new money that's coming into the industry.
Yep. Yeah, I like that, man. That's good. Dominate. That's how you dominate the local market, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I mean, again, like our thing is, you know, hustle, hack, and dominate. Like nothing is ever going to be easy, right? That's where the hustle comes in. Like you got to start thinking about, you know, what is the status quo? How are things been done? And then how can you hustle and, you know, make sure that you're putting in the work, the energy, the effort in order to make it fruitful, right? The other part of that is the hack. It's all right, great. Let's figure out what's been working. And then let's hack that, right? Let's actually break it down and find out how is it that we can go ahead and make it faster, make it better, make it more profitable, have it take, you know, less time, whatever that looks like, right? Start thinking legitimately outside of the box. And all of that gears into really, truly trying to dominate just your local space, whatever that local space is for you. So in some cases, it's just a zip code. In other cases, it's an entire state or, you know, tri-state area, whatever that looks like for you and whatever your goals and ambitions are. Some companies don't want to be a growth company, and that's fine. You know, pick a number that works for you to where you're happy, your family's happy, your employees are happy, and, you know, call it a day. You know, that's not a bad life. You know what I mean? But yeah, man. So tons of good stuff and tons of like great things that are happening in the industry. So Jon, if someone wanted to go ahead and reach out to you, more importantly, if they wanted to go ahead and, you know, get their hands on, you know, all of the books that you've written and kind of keep an eye out for your future book, where would they go ahead and hunt that down? And then where can they follow you at? And don't be ashamed. You could always plug in your podcast as well.
Almost everything I have is on thedyojo.com, dyojo.com. I think I'm on all the socials, and the books are available on Amazon. If somebody's interested in doing, you know, a bulk order, getting them signed for some reason, then, you know, I can do that directly. And I had a lot of fun, you know, talking with a group of project managers about book 3. So if people want to set something like that up, my email is iz at thedyojo.com. And then book 4, that's almost all my books, the Dyojo / book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. Try to keep it easy.
Nice and simple.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jon, for taking some time today and joining us on the Restoration Domination Podcast. It was a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you again. Thank you for what you're doing and for inviting me on and just providing a real voice. I mean, I learned something today. I love picking your brain and really had fun speaking with you in person in Florida. So hopefully we'll see you next year.
Awesome. And Restoration Nation, make sure that you check out the links that are located in the video description below and or in the show notes. And as per usual, get out there, hustle, hack, and dominate.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Hook up with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Restoration Domination to catch video interviews, highlights, and behind-the-scenes content. And follow your host at Rico Garcia Jr. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.